Awesome. Well, for everybody, regardless of whether you've been here to 50 of these or whether this is your first or second, we see a lot of second folks joining us. Welcome. We do these monthly, and the topic always changes. Today, we're really focusing on the guest experience and what can sort of differentiate the experiences that folks have when they rent from you. And so, I'm joined today by two folks who are very well versed in this, who are going to be able to share what they're doing in their businesses and what's working and how they've how they've gotten to where we are today. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and jump right in. Two things that I will say. One, we will be taking questions. So if something comes up that's discussed and you want to dig into it more, you have a follow-up question, feel free to add those in either the chat or the Q&A, and we'll get to those as soon as we can. Or if there's something else that you're thinking about specifically when it comes to guest experience, you can also ask those questions, and we'll do our best to get through as many of those as we can. I am going to, before I ask our panelists to introduce themselves, I am going to go ahead and put up a poll for y'all to take while these guys are introducing themselves, because we want to understand if you are, as you think about guest experience in your own business, what is the barrier that is sort of impacting you on how this works? So while you guys are doing that, we're going to go ahead and have our panelists introduce themselves. And Rose, I'll start with you.
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you, Breezeway, for having me here. We are Breezeway users, highly recommend them. My name is Rose, and I'm the owner of Your Family's Place. And we own and manage large vacation rentals that are family friendly right outside of Ohio's Amish country. So the most important thing everyone needs to know about me is I am a mom of 6 kids. I also homeschool them because I'm a special type of crazy. And I'm very excited. Next year, I'm going to have a senior and a kindergartner. So I am both beginning and ending my journey there.
Amazing. Nick.
Yep. And thanks, Rose, man. That's tough to follow that. My name's Nick Russell, and I am the COO of the Cottage and the Key. I've been here for about 11 years, and my journey with vacation rentals started like 13 years ago as a guest, actually, for the company I work for. And I was kind of blown away by the experience, the hospitality that was provided to me. And, I was excited to kind of build and scale a company with our founder and our CEO, Heather Van Wee. And I, had to kind of start at the bottom and work my way up, and always heavily focused on operations and guest experience, especially the experience that I had. And, I would say too, Breezeway is a big piece of what we do, both front facing and behind the scenes on the execution side. And excited to, kind of dive into some topics today with everyone.
Amazing. Well, I'm really excited to have both Nick and Rose joining us today, because I think, as we go through this, you'll see, difference in perspective and in the way that their businesses operate, but also what you will consistently see throughout the entire conversation is just the importance and the piece of and the part that guest experience plays, because you can have the best properties and the best processes, and if something goes wrong and it's not handled correctly, then that can certainly sort of turn everything upside down. So usually I wait and make sure that we have 75% of people who have participated, but I think we have some really good stuff that we're going to get through. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to end the poll here, and I'll share the results with you all, because I think this is not going to come as a surprise, right? Team and staffing is a big piece, a big challenge to being able to consistently deliver that guest experience. Time, alignment with owners, and then some folks who are saying, hey, there's something else that is sort of influencing that. And so if you were a something else answerer and you want to throw that in the chat for us to potentially look at and talk about, feel free to drop that in. But again, these are all very common, right? You're not alone in the rationale for these. So appreciate y'all taking a minute to tackle that. Okay, so let's jump in here. I want to kick things off first by just saying, we know obviously that as the vacation rental, short-term rental industry has continued to gain popularity with travelers, that it's increasingly more competitive than it has been in past years. And so with that, I'd love, Rose and Nick, from you guys, how do you see the guest experience really fitting into that, given the competitive nature of where our industry is today?
Yeah, well, I'll start. So, I think, as people are more comfortable utilizing vacation rentals, there's more operators, both small operators and larger ones. And everyone, I think you're constantly trying to, push and level up. Even there's been, even going back to a few years ago with unreasonable hospitality.
Mm-hmm.
Those are things that we were doing, I think, before that became like a big piece of our industry. But I think at that DARM conference when it was brought up, like now everyone's doing it. So I think, even like photography, like I mean, that's a big piece of it for us is the execution. Like we want the best pictures, and we go through a lot of, heartache. We have our own in-house photographer here, so we have complete control over everything. And for example, like we have him go, like when he does a shoot, he's there for like 12 hours. Like he's there waiting for the best light. He gets the morning photos, the daytime, he gets sunset, and he gets nighttime. Because I think a big piece of a property, if they have like landscape lighting, is highlighting the landscape lighting. Um, so we put a lot of effort into the photos, but then which is great because that sells the property. But then now you got to make sure you execute what you sell. And that's, there's a lot of pressure to do that. And if you're showcasing amenity, you have to make sure that it works. So what goes into that beforehand? And even Rose, I think you've got some really interesting amenities at your properties, and like, execution is everything. Anyone can show great photos, especially with AI now. But what does the guest actually experience when they're there, and does the experience match the photos? So I think between more operators entering the space and ramping up the hospitality, and this, the space being, moving less from the Wild West to more of a higher standard. That's one thing we're all facing. And then two, like again, like we're forced to get better pictures and then execute on the experience when the guest is there, making sure that like if you have a slide, it actually works, or like something, or there's no issue with the water coming down the slide, or someone's not gonna, scrape their leg going down, the slide, all those little things. If you have a pool table, you better make sure that you've got everything the guest needs to actually utilize the pool table once they're there. Otherwise, it starts with issues right away, and you get off to the wrong start.
Yeah, absolutely. And that happens, it happens a lot, right?
Hmm. Oh yeah.
Rose, how do you see that playing in?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that happened in our industry in the last 6 years, especially with COVID, is that the barrier to entry went down. And so more people saw what we do as an option for them, either as a side hustle or as a main job that they do. And then they were relying on third-party websites like Airbnb and Vrbo to bring them their guests and their revenue. And so they sort of forgot about the whole process of building a business, and that's building a brand and what that brand experience is. It'd be like starting a shoe company and just selling your shoe on a third-party website like Nike, Reebok. They don't do that. They have a defined brand, and I think people have sort of forgot that part of business building. And so now they're kind of flailing because they don't know what their brand is. So it's really hard to say what your guest experience is if you don't know what your brand is. So, for example, we focus on family vacations. And so everything about our messaging, to the way our homes are set up, the way that we, maintain them, the way that we craft the arrival experience, all of that is focused on what our brand is and who our guests are. And I think what is difficult for some people is that it's hard to take that line item and put it into a spreadsheet. It's hard to say that there's a piece of technology that you can plug in your variables, A, B, C, D, and then it kicks out your brand is XYZ. Because in some ways, these are some of those soft interpersonal skills. We are an industry of relationships. And when we start treating our guests, not necessarily as transactions, but as relationships, and we're educating them about what our brand is and having those expectations and then the execution on the other side, we end up with guests that are loyal to us, that keep on staying with us year after year. And it helps us really dial in what the guest experience is. Now, yes, there's a lot of competition in the industry. There is a lot. But I always view my competition as ourselves and our guests. How do we do the best that we can do? And how do we always elevate that experience for the guests, not looking outwards at, property over here, property over there. I'm competing against ourselves to be better every single time someone stays with us. So again, I do look at what other people are doing, absolutely, but I don't necessarily view them as my competition, because I'm always going to do the best for our guests. And that is really my focus.
I love that. Well, and I think, you guys, you both touched on the idea of, you, Rose, you talked about like your brand and knowing how your brand influences that guest experience. And Nick, you talked about like, the amenities that you offer to your guests when they stay with you. And the fact that if you're highlighting that and it's there, it needs to work. And I think, not that I'm a panelist on this, but I am going to weigh in here and just share, in the last week, I've had 2 instances where something has just not gone right. Once I was at a rental property and an item was broken and it wasn't that big of a deal, right? It was a pool chair, right? It wasn't a big deal. However, it took 36 hours to get resolution to the pool chair. And so I think when we start to think about, these small issues that don't have a huge impact, but when that communication piece is missing, that is really another piece of, I think, how the guest experience fits into being competitive, because you can do everything right. When we start to think about how do you prep for a guest to come in, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but something might get missed. And I think so much of it is also about how we react and how we communicate with our guests throughout the entire journey that really fills that guest experience piece. And so as a guest, I will just say, we all know it, but we got to communicate with our guests, right? As operators. I want to talk a little bit, Rose, you sort of touched on this. And I know when we were doing our prep call for this, we also touched on it, but that difference between, putting your properties out on an OTA and getting new guests to, I've got this guest, they've stayed with me, they've had this great experience. And so how much of your bookings do you attribute to the experience that your guests had in your properties and then the reviews that they go out and share externally, versus what you're doing on a marketing or a pricing perspective? And either one of you guys can take that.
Yeah. So our guests, we have a return rate between 30 and 40% year over year, which is fantastic. So we have folks that stay with us, have a great experience, and they want to keep coming back because they're having that high quality experience. And they also sort of know if they go somewhere else, they're back out in the open market and taking that risk. And so we have the data to show that investing in branding and brand loyalty is a very profitable solution. And not only that, we don't have to then go back out and spend new ad spend on finding new guests. So I actually recently ran numbers on our ad spend. And so right now at our current ad spend, for every dollar we spend in ad, we're bringing in $22 in tracked bookings, which I'm told is very good. So I'm going to be happy with that. But also, once somebody is in our system, once they're in our system, we have a robust email marketing system. And a lot of our emails are not necessarily come stay here, come stay here. I actually use a tone I call the friendly aunt tone, because we all have an aunt who just wants to keep us updated on what's happening in their lives, right? So that's how I view our emails, is that I'm your friendly aunt and I'm just updating you on what's happening. But also that is selling me or the character that I am in your family's place, so people feel comfortable staying. But the other side of feel comfortable is that if they have questions, or even if they do have a problem, that they can ask me, they can tell me, and also know that I'm not going to flip out. Because we all have horror stories about guests, right? But on the other side of it, our guests also have horror stories about hosts. And if you were staying at a hotel and you had a problem, like, the person at the front desk would not flip out on you. Okay. They would not do that. And so we can't do that to our guests. And so we have to create that place where our guests feel that they can tell us if there's a problem, if something is broke, and then it's our job to fix it in a low drama, get it done kind of way. And so we see properties with all these crazy amenities, and that's great. But if if the execution isn't there, people aren't going to come back, keep spending money with you. And it kind of creates this level of distrust between hosts and guests. And we don't want that. We want everybody to be professional and know that they can stay at a short-term rental really anywhere and be certain that they're not dealing with a dramatic host.
Yeah, absolutely. Nick, how does that look for you guys? What when you think about repeat guests and versus new guests, how do you guys sort of approach that at
Yeah,
Down
I mean,
Florida?
it's so I mean, I think it's we every company has a different way, a different philosophy. We want a healthy mix.
Mhm.
But our we have a 50% return guest ratio. Um, a lot of that hinges on the fact that we're down here in Florida and there's snowbirds that will come year to year, year over year. And when we started, with this, we have this whole return guest program on the sales side. And initially, I was kind of like, okay, like we hired a salesperson. From a different industry that I knew from a previous job I had. And so he was new to the industry and he wanted to build this robust return guest program. In my mind, initially, I said, okay, this is going to definitely work January through Easter because everyone comes back here year over year. But I was kind of a little bit hesitant about the results. I was trying to, measure expectations like, hey, the sales team might not find the same results in all these other times of the year because I don't think that people always come back at the same time. And I was surprised. Our return guest campaign is a year-long campaign. People come back at all sorts of times of the year, and I think a lot of that hinges on like when there is an issue, they know they can trust us. So, with our sales team, when we have inquiry come in, there's a saying, speed to lead, like how fast can you respond to that inquiry. Well, like when we have an in-house guest, it's like speed to need.
Yeah.
Like we look at those opportunities. Like if a guest has an issue, how quickly can we resolve it? And like we try to resolve everything within an hour. And if we can't, we're very proactive on the communication, and Breezeway is a big part of that. And even with the automations of like, hey, we received your work order through the text. Okay, it's been started. Now it's been completed. Someone's at the beach. They're getting those automations. They know what's happening. But also just if there isn't the other thing we do is like if there's a real issue, we're like extremely proactive. So if there's an amenity that like we have to wait on a part, we are proactive with compensation. And like that's something that a lot of people don't want to do, or and sometimes it's tough with owners, but like if you lose your AC for like 12 hours, we're not going to wait for you to come and ask us for money back. Like we're going to be proactive about telling you what we're going to do for you. And I think that builds a certain amount of loyalty because the guest goes, okay, if something goes, things are going to happen, things go wrong, but like if they do go wrong, they know we're going to handle it the right way. And that's a big piece of our philosophy as far as guest experience. Like I don't want a guest to ever have to ask for something
Well,
because once it happens, it's too late.
I think that's interesting, Nick, because I'm also curious. We talk a lot about like, when something does go wrong, do you, there's been lots of conversation around like, do you ask the guests what they want, right? Do you provide that? I would imagine, right, that probably means you guys have put parameters in place around what that compensation structure looks like, and you have that. I would also imagine that by being proactive in that, you probably surprise some of them, because you're not just like, oh, sorry, yeah, we're going to be, we're going to work on it, right? You're actively saying, we recognize this is what we're doing to control it or resolve it, but also here's what we're going to do for you. And I think from a guest perspective, that has to really sort of make them, like you said, feel very confident.
Yeah, that builds they're like, okay, if something happens, like, hey, even if we don't stay in the same house, we want to stay with this company. Again, it's build that brand
Right.
loyalty. And if they, you'll see in our reviews, like people say, I've stayed at vacation rentals for like the last 10 years. We've never had this experience with this service, or like it also kind of negates a bad review. So
Yeah.
like the thing is, like, once a guest has to ask for something, and again, this has to be valid. Like, it's almost too late. Like, you can turn it around, but it's a lot harder if you're proactive. And and again, there's two things. Like, okay, did something go wrong with amenity that's out of your control? It's house related, or did we make a mistake?
Hmm.
Us because we didn't communicate something. So I think just being proactive goes a long way, and it builds, I guess, loyalty. And a lot of times, like, those people that are the most escalated have like a crazy um rebooking rate with us if we do it right. It doesn't happen all the time, and not everyone's reasonable, but I think it's worked out well for us.
I
It's so
think I have a magic phrase that I use. I know, Nick, you love my magic phrases. So I like to tell people what I want them to think, because I think that's the most effective way. And so when I have a guest like that, I will say, it's important to me that we do right by you and
Mhm.
your reservation. So I'm saying I'm acknowledging it, and it's important to me, and that we are going to do right by you. And then I'll tell them what it is I'm going to do. So I'm always kind of making that first offer. It's like the reverse of a negotiation. Normally, you want the other person to make the offer first, but I want to drive this, and I want to give them that message that I recognize your problem is important, and that I'm going to do right by them. And then I'm going to order you guys some pizza for dinner, or I'm going to do XYZ to solve your problem. And I give them that clear message that we are going to do right by you.
well. I would imagine too. That not only makes them feel good, but it also de-escalates the issue. I was thinking, Nick, as you were talking about a stay that I had about last year, and we had an issue with the washer and dryer, and it was annoying, fine, whatever. But what the manager said to me was, "We will come and take your items, and we will launder them and bring them back for you." And my immediate response as a guest was, "Oh, no, 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 it's not that big of a deal," right? Because in my mind, that was like them going way out of their way to accommodate a need that I had, which really wasn't a huge impact. And I think that that's the thing, right? So often we've got guests who are accustomed to asking for refunds, and there's all those folks who are out there. But the majority of the time, you have great people who are coming and staying with you, and so by being proactive, by being respectful, that makes a big difference, and it probably de-escalates a lot of things that could be blown out of proportion.
And really, right from the beginning of my conversations with our guests at the point of booking, I send them a message that we're going to take excellent care of them, because I tell them exactly that. So when a new booking comes through our system, I will record a 20-second video. I just do it with my phone. I don't overthink it. I don't do hair and makeup like I have on right now. But I say, Nick, thank you for booking whatever property in, let's say, September. And then I say, you can relax and know that I'm going to take excellent care of you. And just giving them that message right from the beginning, you've made the right choice. You can relax, stress levels go down, because I am going to take excellent care of you. So I'm telling them that right from the beginning. And it gives them that opportunity to know that you're booking with a real person. It really matters to me, and that they don't have to worry about those kinds of things happening on their vacation. So if we want our guests to feel that way, let's just tell them that.
Yeah. That's amazing. Let's talk a little bit about, when a guest actually arrives to the unit. We've talked about once they're there and there's something that goes, that might go wrong, and sort of how we react to that. But I'm curious, there's this idea of property ready or guest ready. And I'd love to hear from you guys, like what that means to your team, right? What has to be done and accomplished and completed by the folks out in the field, before a property is ready for the guest to check in?
So what we do before our guests actually check in is we call them pre-arrival inspections, and we have a checklist inside Breezeway for this. So we view the pre-arrival inspection as a separate task from cleaning. Our cleaners are there. Our cleaners are cleaning. It is their job to ensure that our property is spotless. But the pre-arrival inspection is that last level of checking. And we're not just going in and making sure there's no dust. We're also staging the property as we go. All right. So I think about it as when you are entering, let's say, if you're going to Disney World and you're going in the front gates of Disney World, things aren't going to be dark. Things aren't going to be closed off. It's going to feel welcoming. So when we are staging our properties for guest arrival, we are turning on lights so they're not coming into a dark coffin. We like to put kind of background music on. We'll pull up YouTube and do like coffee shop music, not too loud, just kind of gentle. In the holidays, we'll put holiday music on, and so the house has some life to it. We are going back. We're checking all of our supplies. Do we have paper towels, dishwasher pods, all of those kinds of things? We are going to go back and we are going to recheck to make sure that our cleaners have staged everything so that they are guest ready. And I like to think about it as an experience that our guests are walking into. So when they walk in the door, what's the first thing that they see? How are they touring the house? How are things unfolding? Now, the difference between what we do and what hotels do is that they can come in, overnight or during the day and like reset activities. We don't do that because we're not in the homes with our people, and watching what our guests do in properties is creepy, and we're not going to be creepy hosts, right? and I certainly read Unreasonable Hospitality. I thought it was a very interesting book. However, it's about the restaurant industry. And when you are in a restaurant, you can actually watch your customers consume your product, right? We don't and shouldn't be watching our customers consume our product. And so that puts us in a much trickier situation because we want to stage things so that they unfold in the way that we want when we're not even there. Okay. So I like to think of it as almost like a museum or like a children's museum. You know how there are these opportunities at like children's museums that your family can go up to and experience. All right. And they're set up ready to go. And so that's how I view getting our homes ready for when our guests walk in the door, that I want these experiences to unfold in the way that I want, even though I'm not there. So those are some of the steps that we're doing in our pre-arrival inspection. There's obviously, you're checking all of our safety systems. We're checking the hot tub. We're documenting all of that because certainly there's going to be that tricky guest who's going to be like, well, the hot tub is cloudy. And you're like, no, I have a picture of it. It's not. You're just a problem person. But so there's the documentation side of it. But I like to think of it as setting up the property for our guests to experience and for things to unfold without us being there.
Yeah. Nick, what about you guys? Any different stuff that you guys are doing? I mean, I know we've talked. There's a story that you shared a few years back. It was right after we all, everyone sort of had. Will Guidara came to that DARM conference you're referencing the first time, and he talked about the unreasonable hospitality. And I remember you sharing a story in an Elevate a few months after that about how you guys think about the unreasonable hospitality and continuing to delight your guests. But anything from that perspective?
Yeah, I would just say that, so we just, Rose is correct. There's only so much you can do once they're there. But I would say we do a couple things. One is like our sales team does a great job collecting really good notes before the guest arrives. So, to vet them and make sure they're the right fit, but also like, hey, let's take advantage. Let's surprise them once they're here. So if somebody has a anniversary, we document in our arrival report, and like there's going to be a handwritten card with like maybe a bottle of champagne. If a kid is having a birthday, whatever it is, we want to know about it, and we're going to make sure we acknowledge that to the guest when they get here. Even as we grow, we don't want to lose that connection to the guest. And then we do during like our season, which is like January through Easter, basically, once a week, we have this, we call it brunch and bubbly, where the guests come to our offices and we cater it, and we have like champagne, mimosas, and we just connect with them. And during that time of year, people stay for a month, so they're super excited to come in and socialize, different than a weekstay. But yeah, we were listening. There was a guest that was talking to one of our salespeople, and he was like, "Hey, I want to rent this house next year because it has a I can't remember what it was anymore. I think
Ping pong table.
it was a ping pong table. Yes, thank you.
I remember the
Yeah,
story. I remember the story,
yeah.
Nick. You
Because
remember what we were
they had
talking
a
about
ping pong
too.
table. And we had just, we have an awesome CEO, visionary owner that's like very like encourages us to be creative and like, doesn't watch every little nickel that we spend. And she kind of challenged us all like to like take an opportunity and surprise somebody. So our operations manager, Greer, was listening to that guest talk to the salesperson, and she went back to her office and put a work order in to have one of our maintenance guys like purchase, deliver, and set up the ping pong table for the guests for when they got back to surprise them. So like we're looking for those opportunities all the time. We have the same pre-arrival inspection that's separate from the cleaners. We stage the house. We want everything to look perfect when the guest comes
Yeah.
in. We want everything working. And even when we have our inspection, like we'll initiate work orders. We call them check-in todays. And those are just work orders that, there might be something like, hey, let's touch up a wall right here. It could be anything. We want the guest to want everything to be perfect when the guest gets there. And if it's not, because things happen, we want them at least to know that we care. We're in the house and like we're trying to get it as close to 100% as we possibly can.
I love that. And I think it's so interesting, right? And I think that, a lot of things when we did that poll at the beginning, right? One of the biggest thing was staffing, time, owner alignment, right? I think about why people aren't sort of don't feel like they're able to execute on guest experience all the time. But I think that what you two have both just sort of shared in the ways that you approach things in your businesses, right, is that regardless of who is taking that action, whether you, Rose, is is the owner and the face of the company, or whether it's Greer or someone else on your team, empowering the people who you work with to go above and beyond and to really drive that guest experience can be incredibly powerful. I also, I guess we're sort of working backwards here, but I think there's this conversation about when does the guest experience start? And that could be a very long, completely separate conversation. But, is it when the guest finds and submits that first inquiry to you? Is it when they book? Is it when they arrive? Like, where do you guys view that guest experience? Because what I'm hearing, Nick, from you and what you just shared is that guest experience, even if it's not external facing, starts the minute someone books that property, because your team is starting to collect information that's going to influence what they experience when they arrive. So I'm curious, how you guys think about that and approach that in your businesses.
I mean, I think it starts like the first time they land on your page on an OTA or your website before they even interact with you. And I just know I love to travel. And I love staying in Airbnbs or VRBOs or vacation rentals. And I'll message a host just to get an idea what their response time is. And if I'm waiting too long, I'm like already like this isn't the right place. So I think that's pre-booking.
Yeah.
So I think that whoever is on the front lines from your sales side, that's when it starts. But even before that, it's your pictures, it's how you describe the property on your listings, whether it's on your website or an OTA. So I think everything matters once you get it out there from the marketing perspective, and then once the guest engages with you, it's like it's not just the speed of your engagement, your response, it's the quality and how good of an answer you give, and like even how detailed you're going to be. Like, don't just mail in and give like a one sentence answer. Like, this is a big decision someone's making on where they want to spend their time with their loved ones, and like you only get so many chances to travel with the people you love. So, um, like these are big decisions. You can't get so transactional, like Rose said. Like this is important. So, every interaction you have with somebody, from the first moment they land on you to like when they leave, matters, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think the guest experience starts before they book, unless they're coming across you for the first time. But a lot of folks, if we get a lot of reservations from social media, for example. And so if somebody first comes across our page on social media, at that moment they might not be ready to book their vacation right then. But if you earn that follow and the people are watching your content, when the time comes that they want to book a vacation, then you will be top of mind. So it's the idea that Nick was saying is everything that you're putting out there for people to consume about your properties, about your brand, needs to reflect your values. And so it does need to be quality content. It can't just be drivel. It needs to be in line with the experience that you want your guests to have when they stay with you. And that is difficult. That's consistency. It's not technically difficult. But marketing is an endurance sport. Sometimes people think that social media is just, make a post hit post and then like you're good for the week, and then the reservations are just gonna, flow in. Like that's not how it works. It's a long game. You have to be really consistent. It's like a marathon. And when people are ready to book, if you have put good quality content out there, hopefully you're reeling in the good quality guests that want to stay with you. And so if you are doing that, that guest experience starts way before they actually book. And that's what we need to kind of remember as an industry, is people are having more of that guest experience with third parties like Airbnb and Vrbo, but we can take that power back ourselves, and we can start creating that for our guests and the value that that brand brings us. So we have to, we start with that good guest experience. It's our whole communication flow up to the point of reservation. If people are booking way far in advance, there's this long time period where they're just waiting. How do we reassure them that they made a good choice? Well, I tell them you made a great choice. And then as that lead up to the actual reservation, I do think, and I know I experienced this and a lot of other people do, the night before check-in is meltdown central. If you're packing yourself, you're packing your kids, you're questioning all of your life decisions. Why am I doing this? I don't want to go. I should just stay home. That is the point where I will call, or a member of our team, usually it's me, because I like to do this. I will call our guests the night before check-in because I know they're melting down, right? And I'll say, this is Rose from your family's place. And at first they're kind of nervous because maybe they think, oh my God, something's wrong. I've made a mistake. And I say, I'm just calling to see if you have any questions before check-in tomorrow. Just a really simple message. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. That's great. But I want to alleviate that anxiety and help them get over that panic night, the night before they check in. The other thing I do in that phone conversation is I step them through the exact steps that are going to happen the next day. This is where your door code's going to be. This is how you know what it is, all of that. Because getting people in the door, hassle-free is one of the most basic things we do. So I have that conversation where I step them through everything. Like, for example, some of our homes have indoor pools. Indoor pools need door alarms. That is a basic safety mechanism that should be on all pools, whether they're indoor or outdoor. The door alarms are loud and they freak people out, and then they want to turn them off. So our messaging has that information in there, but I'm going to tell them again, the door alarm is going to go off. It's going to be loud. This is how you turn it off, because they still are surprised, even though that's in all the messaging. So that's all part of just the guest experience, all that journey that they're going through. And then how do you follow up with that at the end of it? How do you, extend the intimacy per se? Like once they check out, how do you make them, have happy feelings about what they did so they want to come back year after year?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, right? And I think in the growth phase that you're in, right, those personal calls are an incredible touch. I think for, some operators on the call today, they may be thinking like, well, there's no way, right, that I could make that call.
I want to interject here because I know I've heard that pushback many times. But I want to give two pieces of data. One of my friends, her daughter just recently started working at the Four Seasons. You know what the Four Seasons does? They call their guests the night before check-in. I recently read a book about the Ritz-Carlton, because we all want to be at these standards, right? What does the Ritz-Carlton do? They call their guests the night before check-in.
All right. Well, I don't know what to say to that. There you go.
Challenge
accepted, Rose. Challenge accepted.
Yes.
I think, listen, and I think that's an incredible touch. It drives a lot of confidence. My only comment on that is that whether it is a personal call, which is incredible if you can do, right? And clearly we know very large corporations are doing this, or no matter how you're communicating it. I think the biggest piece and the thing that I'm hearing is you have to make sure that you're communicating to the guests what they can expect. Otherwise, you start to see that like that freak out that they have the night before happens when they arrive, and then that's a whole different thing. Nick, what are you guys doing in that regard? Are you calling? Are you messaging? What does that look like?
No, we don't call. We interesting idea, and my wheels are turning a little bit listening to it. But we do a welcome call. So the sales team does a call leading up to it, for sure. That because that's like um important. That's part of our sales process. So we haven't even talked about the return guest. Like our sales team, and again, they got very scientific about all this, and they do come from like a hospitality background. Our sales manager does. He does a welcome call because he also has like during the guest stay, he has it mapped out to like if they come for 7 days, for example, he knows the perfect time to call them is Wednesday. And that's when he makes all his out because that's he's tried every day, and that's where the highest conversions are. But in order to make that call on Wednesday, he has to have that welcome call prior to, which I think is I think it's 3 or 4 days before they arrive where they answer any questions. Um, but I guess that's intentional to build a relationship, obviously, with on the return guest campaign, we call it. But and then on top of that, our operations team, who's in charge of handling the guest stay, sends just a courtesy text through Breezeway. It's automated. I believe it's 18 hours prior to their arrival. And then what I've noticed too is like the freak out time for me for guests is like their first 12 to 18 hours, especially if they're traveling with small children. It's a lot. It's a huge undertaking getting packed the night before, either getting in a car, even if I mean, cars are probably even worse than flying, depending on what happens to the flight. But even if it's 4 or 5 hour drive, like you get to the house, you got tons of luggage, you're unpacking it, everyone's tired, they're a little bit stressed. Um, so that for those first interactions, like that's de-escalations become critical. That's also why we wait until Wednesday to rebook them because that's kind of what they're on their apex of their stay, and they're like, oh, thinking like we gotta come back. Um, but yeah, so we have different layers of communication between sales and operations prior to their stay, and then we're available at any time they need to talk to us or text us. I think but I also too, I think like in the world with like automations and even AI and all these things, like the personal touch is like helps you differentiate. And um, we like to see them when they're here, especially if they have a problem. We want to go
Yeah.
out and see them in person and know that there's a face behind the computer or the phone that cares.
No, absolutely. And I think that's exactly what that personal call does. And maybe I'm staying corrected. I don't know you, but you also just said you guys are calling. So I'm gonna read the Ritz-Carlton and the Four Seasons books, and I'm gonna educate myself too here on this. Okay. So I have a takeaway for folks, but I want to hear from you guys. If we'll do two more quick questions, and then we'll, obviously, if there's anybody in the audience who has questions that you guys want to put out for Nick or Rose, we are happy to address those. But I want to sort of see if there's one thing that you guys can share with folks in the audience that you would say, like, this is going to make a big difference. Just one, because I can pick out two or three of things we've already talked about that I would say, if you're not doing this, do it. What would your one action that folks could implement in their businesses today be?
Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah.
Okay, so boy, that's a tough question. I would say if there's one thing, I just think it's cleanliness. I think the most everything can work or it's just great, but the house isn't perfectly cleaned. Not by perfect, I mean perfect. Much different than when residential cleaning. Like there can't be a speck of dirt anywhere in the house. There can't be a single spot on any of the linens. There can't be, the house has to be clean at the highest standard possible. And for me, I mean, that was why, when I was interviewing with Heather like a long time ago, and I was listening to they had an issue with cleaning, and she's a crazy stickler for cleanliness. And so I identified immediately, I'm like, okay, if I can prove myself this way, I can probably like, grow within this company. Like that's kind of what we're known for, I would say, is our cleanliness. And so focusing on that is the most important. Everything can work, work or not work, but if the house is clean, the guests will give you a lot of benefit of the doubt. No one wants to get into a dirty bed or a dirty shower or serve food to their family with any kind of dirt. So like
Right.
easier said than done. It requires like a really intense pre-arrival inspection and really good training with your cleaners, especially as you scale. In season, we might have 90 to 110 turnovers all in one day. And that's when you really find out how good you are. Like anyone can do a cleaning for a non-turnover. But when you start doing turnovers at scale is when you really find out what you got. So I think for me, it starts and stops with cleaning more than anything.
Amazing.
Mhm. I would say, yeah, I totally agree with everything Nick's saying, especially because I have stayed in some really dirty, really dirty places. So yes, and man, do I have stories to tell. But I think you should think about what it feels like when your guests actually walk in the door. Like I mentioned, the idea of staging things almost like a children's museum so that they unfold in the way that you want. Kind of put your curiosity, hat on. And what does that feel like as a guest to walk in the door of one of your properties? And maybe you're not the person to do that. Maybe you could have one of your friends, have a work colleague come in and have that arrival sequence in your property, and you watch them do it, kind of break it down of what people are doing. Do some research on that, so what those touch points are, even like what order people walk through the house. How do you make things unfold so something exciting happens at the end? So that's what I would suggest, is you think about that arrival sequence. That first 15 to 30 minutes in the property is really that peak of vacation for people. Like this, we're here, we finally made it, everyone's kind of riding high. How do you just elevate that experience? So you need to really study what people are doing so that it's unfolding in the way that you want.
Yeah. And I would I'm thinking about some of my personal travel experiences in the last few weeks, right? I would even take that one step further around like send them the same communications you're sending to the guests, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they're getting hit six different ways, and different and they're six different, if they're getting hit by you via text, via phone call, via email, and the messaging isn't all consistent, right? That experience starts. But I love that. I think getting somebody into the property and seeing how your guests experience it, because I think that as we are all, professionals, we're in these homes every day, you just sort of have the idea of how you think someone is going to experience your home. And so I love that about like bringing somebody who doesn't necessarily doesn't know the property to the extent in which you do, is incredibly valuable, and really eye-opening, right?
Yes. Because you can spend, you may spend a lot of time in the properties, or whoever is, setting them up may do that. But the way that you're interacting with the stuff there might be different than the way the guests are interacting with it. And so knowing that information helps you have a better, experience for them. It's unraveling the way that you want it to.
Absolutely. Um, we have just a couple more minutes. I have more questions that I can ask, but if there is anybody, if there's anything that anyone else in the audience, I know there was one question about how many check-ins on average are you guys seeing? I think Nick, you said what, 90 to 100, and what'd you say?
Yeah, it depends. I mean, during season, anywhere between I would say 75 to like 105. It depends on how long people stay. So like the longer stays, you don't have as many turnovers, but like trying to make sure you don't lose your quality during that time is a challenge because you're going to be having inspectors, depending on how you have it organized, but inevitably you're going to have inspectors that aren't regulars. So
Hmm.
how do you make sure they understand like what the stakes are? I mean, for us, it's just spending more time with them, making sure they're like feel maybe more a part of this thing. So that means like on Saturday mornings, because usually, you got the Saturday to Saturday cycles, you're, ordering breakfast, they're coming to our office, you're meeting with them, we're doing, slide presentations, whatever we need, obviously the breezeway thing's huge of making sure they're following what we need to follow. And but also like if there's issues with a guest during the stay, it's making sure we flag them and like understand what went wrong. And if it's an inspection, you're going back to the inspector and you're just teaching them like, hey, this is what happened. This is the inspect, with Breezeway, you can see the steps and hopefully there's pictures that are documenting what they're doing. So you're just over communicating, really, I would say, in coaching. But over communication is a big piece of
Mhm.
at least what
But
I've
we
heard.
are not as big of a company as Nick. Not at all, and I'm okay with that because we also own our properties. We don't manage for other people, so that whole like aspect of vacation rentals where you're dealing with owners, that's me. I have to deal with myself, which might be scarier. But so we are about to open another set. We'll have 8 short-term rentals. We also have portfolio properties like single-family homes. We do midterm rentals. We are not really in a Saturday to Saturday kind of market. Our guests are coming for 3 to 4 days in the summer in our off season, which is going to be like we'll be pretty busy through January. So like January, February, March, April, we're going to fill every weekend in. So we may have 3 or 4 check-ins on a day, but we have a more variable schedule because we're not a necessarily traditional vacation rental market, and our guests are mostly are driving in for a couple day getaway with their family.
And fun fact, everyone, Rose actually operates in the town that I grew up in Ohio.
That's
So
right.
when I met her, I was like, this is amazing. I didn't even know that there were vacation rentals in this town. So
Right.
it is a very cute little area. So if you were ever thinking about Ohio as a vacation,
Who would
you
have
know what
thought?
to say. Um, it's so funny though, Rose, that you saying that you as the owner, right, as the owner, you get to just deal with yourself. And we were at, Nick and I talked about this a little bit earlier, the executive summit last week, and Jody Rafosco, who is the chair of VRMA of the board, was on stage, and she's the same way, right? They own and operate all of the homes that they own. And she said the same thing, like, but I have to deal with myself, which is a good thing and a bad thing, right? Because you can no longer say like, oh, we spoke to the owner and they said, right? Because you're just talking to yourself. So
Yeah. But what I do is I'll turn that around, and if the guests are being, or they need something, I can be like, you know what? These are my homes and I'm going to do the right thing. And so I'm going to get to decide. So you can just kind of flip that around and
flip
use
the
that to
script.
your advantage. Like,
Yeah.
throw caution to the wind. They're my homes and I get to do whatever I want. So I just, yeah, I can work both sides of it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And listen, the thing is whether you own them, whether you manage them for someone else, the work that you all are doing on a daily basis and the guests that you're interacting with, like it is a challenge. And so either way, it's a lot of work. There's another question in here, and we'll wrap up on this one unless something else comes in before we finish. But we talked a little bit about communicating, and Rose, you talked about like, helping guests understand what you're going to do to take care of them. And Nick, you talked about how you guys are proactive in resolution. But Luciana had a question about how you manage the hard communication, right? The example was, garbage collection is really difficult to get compliance with. And so any examples around hard communication and sort of how you approach that?
Mhm. So specifically for garbage, I'm not sure if her question was specifically about garbage. We actually have dumpsters on the property, and we do ask our guests to leave their trash in them. Sometimes they don't like the location of the dumpsters because they're not right next to the house. And I say, well, we have to do that because the local wildlife is too clever for their own good, and we don't want them visiting you. And when we say that, people then rethink how the dumpster is further away from the house. But I think the first step is understanding what the guest problem is. And even if you think that it is nonsense, to them, it is very real. And it's not that they may be overreacting, but it's your job to de-escalate, to listen, to try to resolve, and to try to de-escalate, because when people are in your properties, you are in some ways kind of in a tricky position, right? We don't want poop smeared on the walls, right? And so sometimes we have to be very neutral, sometimes gray rocky with people that are dramatic. But there have been guests that, were not a good fit when they got there. And I said, you know what, this is not a good fit. I'm glad to, I say what I'm going to do. I'm glad to refund the rest of your reservation. You can find a place that fits you. Now, the other side of it is I'm also the owner, so I can say that. It's a little bit different when you're dealing with other people's properties. So that's what I always try to listen, take their complaints seriously, even if I think they're nonsense. And if somebody is truly a problem, then I say, I am glad to, and this is what I'm going to do. while you leave the property.
While you leave my house.
Yes, I say what I'm going to do, or I tell them what they can do, not what they can't do. You're welcome to stay if you stop setting off fireworks. I tell them what they can do, not what they can't do.
I love that.
That's a teacher trick. I did that as a teacher. If you tell people what they can't do, they want to do it. So
that's true. They just want to do it more.
Yeah, I just want to do it more.
Nick, anything on your end additional to that?
Yeah. I would say, a couple things. One is just typically what I've noticed when a guest has an issue, like they're looking for leadership. They're on vacation and they want someone to provide some leadership. So I think the first step is letting them vent. So don't try to overtalk them. And actively listen. They're gonna probably tell you how they want you to solve their problem just by listening. But I also think like showing up in person is huge. If it's a real issue, you can't, you know, do it behind a computer for sure, or the phone is a step closer to that. But I think actually showing up in person and getting a true assessment on the person, on their mannerisms, on the actual issue allows you to collect intelligence and also kind of like naturally de-escalates. Look, if the guest is unreasonable for us, like, and they're at the beginning of their stay, like we'll let them leave and we'll give them all their money back.
Yeah.
And, like, we don't have any issue with that. So it's if that's the issue, then if they're being unreasonable, we will tell them that. And once they hear that, that might naturally de-escalate them, or they take you up on your offer, but it kind of slows things down because like, oh, they're willing to give us all their money back.
Right.
But trash, I saw the question. I don't know exactly specifically what she's referring to, but like we have an issue with trash here in the summers because it's really hot and humid. And guests were complaining about trash a lot, and trash didn't get collected till like Tuesday or Wednesday, and a lot of guests were checking on Saturday. So what we started doing was having some of our maintenance guys like just kind of clean the trash cans before the guests got there. So it wasn't fun, but it definitely resolved a lot of issues that we had.
Absolutely. Well, Luciana, I hope that answered your question. I want to thank you, Nick. Thank you, Rose, for joining us today. I love this part of my job and getting to talk with people and share how operators are operating and like what's going on in their businesses, because I think in every one of these calls, there's something that can be taken away and a learning that can happen. So I appreciate you both giving up some time today and sharing what you guys are doing in your businesses. And for folks who are on the call, and if this is your first webinar, like I said, we do these monthly. If it is your frequent flyer or even your second time, as I thought we had a bunch of second timers here, we do have another webinar scheduled for next month. It's going to be on Thursday, June 24th at 2:00 Eastern. So we're going back to our Thursdays next month. And I'm going to be joined by the founders of Hospitality Heroes, which is a nonprofit that focuses on helping hospitality professionals when disaster strikes. And so, oftentimes we think about hurricanes or in the recent years, we've seen a lot of fires, but these are all different types of natural disasters and things that are beyond our control. And so the founders of that organization are going to be joining me, and we're going to be talking about what you can be doing to prepare your business and also make sure that you're able to effectively care for the folks that work with you and are powering your rentals. So that's going to be on the 25th. If you want to register, we will obviously do some communication about that, but this is the first announcement of that. And so that QR code will take you to the Zoom registration. And you can reserve your spot there. But for everybody who is with us today, thank you so much for joining us for our May Elevate special. Thanks again to Nick and Rose, and we'll see you all next month.